In the beginning, before the stars burned with the fire of unending war, before the galaxy tore itself apart in betrayal and blood, there were the Primarchs. Forged by the Emperor of mankind in the depths of the Imperial Palace, 20 beings were created to serve as the generals, governors, and sons of the Master of Humanity. Each was a superhuman titan, vastly superior to any mortal or even space marine. They were living weapons, but they were more than that. Each Primarch embodied a different aspect of the Emperor's design. Guilliman the statesman, Russ the hunter, Dorn the bulwark, and Corax the shadow. They were not just his creations, they were his vision made flesh. The Primarchs were meant to be the leaders of the Great Crusade, a sweeping campaign to unify all of mankind beneath the banner of the Imperium. The Emperor gave each one command over a space marine legion, his own gene sons, whose DNA was derived from the Primarch's own. In this way, the Primarchs did not merely lead armies, they inspired cultures, founded legacies, and reshaped entire regions of space. They were like gods walking among men. Their arrival on their respective homeworlds, scattered across the galaxy by the treachery of chaos in their infancy, became the stuff of legend. Each Primarch grew into a warlord, a ruler, a savior of their people, until the Emperor found them again, one by one, and brought them back into the fold. From that point on, the galaxy shook beneath their feet. Planets were conquered, civilizations were uplifted or destroyed. The dream of a unified humanity seemed within reach. To speak of the Primarchs is to speak of more than strength. It is to speak of loyalty, identity, and legacy. Their very existence anchored the Imperium during its most fragile hour. Their words shaped doctrine. Their choices, both wise and disastrous, altered the fate of billions. Even amongst the Imperium's billions of heroes and martyrs, no beings held more sway over the course of mankind's destiny than the Primarchs. The people of the 31st millennium did not worship the Emperor. Not yet. But many came close to revering the Primarchs. How could they not? These sons of the Master of mankind towered above mere mortals. They could slay a demon with a thought, hold back an avalanche with one arm, or outwit alien tyrants with terrifying ease. Some, like Vulkan, could not truly die. Others, like the lion, were creatures of relentless strategy and uncanny perception. Their minds were faster than any cogitator. Their bodies could withstand even orbital bombardment. Their hearts beat in tune with the ambition of an empire that would span the stars. And yet, despite their might, the Primarchs were not immune to fate, or to hubris, or to the whispering lies of the warp. When the Horus Heresy tore the galaxy apart, it was not merely a civil war, it was a sundering of the Emperor's vision. 9 of the 20 Primarchs fell to chaos. Sons betrayed their father, and brothers turned on each other. The heresy ended in fire and tragedy, with the Emperor mortally wounded and confined to the Golden Throne. From that moment onward, the burden of leadership fell more heavily than ever upon the remaining loyal Primarchs. But one by one, even these loyal sons began to vanish. Some were consumed by duty, choosing exile or endless crusade. Others were lost in the fires of battle, and some simply disappeared, leaving behind only echoes, relics, and a longing hope that they might one day return. What makes the loss of the Primarchs so profound is not merely that they were heroes, it is that they were irreplaceable. The Imperium could manufacture space marines, clone warriors, raise armies in the trillions, but it could not recreate the Primarchs. The Emperor himself could not do so again, not in his broken state. Each lost Primarch was a fracture in the Imperium's soul. Without them, the galaxy has become darker, less certain. For 10,000 years, the Imperium has fought on, grinding forward with blind inertia, guided more by superstition and fear than vision. The High Lords of Terra squabble and scheme in their absence. Whole chapters of Space Marines are defined by the teachings, or the ghosts, of their missing gene sires. The Black Library is filled with prophecies and doom-laden verses about the return of the Primarchs when the stars align and the galaxy's final war begins. And still, they are not here. The Primarchs were more than commanders. They were the spiritual core of the Imperium. They were living proofs of the Emperor's greatness. They were paragons around which whole cultures rallied. The Ultramarines became a mirror of Roboute Guilliman's order and justice. The Space Wolves still echo the wild fury and loyalty of Leman Russ. Even now, the Dark Angels search the galaxy for redemption, still haunted by the loss of the Lion. To lose a Primarch was to lose more than a leader. It was to lose direction, to lose the living bond between past and present, between the ideals of the Imperium and its grim, blood-soaked reality. And yet, their stories do not end with their disappearance. Some believe the Lion stirs in his tomb beneath the rock, that Leman Russ hunts in the warp, waiting for the hour of the wolf, that Corax still wages a silent war against the traitors, his shadow touching their nightmares, that Vulkan, the Unburned, has not yet played his final role. Whether true or not, these legends endure, because the Imperium needs them to. In a galaxy of darkness, the Primarchs remain beacons, absent, yes, but never forgotten. Their absence is not merely a wound. It is a mystery, a tension in the heart of the Imperium. Where did they go? Why did they leave? Will they return? And if they do, will they come as saviors or something else? This is the story of those who stayed loyal, of their disappearances, each unique, each tragic, each soaked in myth and war. These are the tales of the lost sons of the Emperor, and the questions their absence still dares us to ask, for in their loss we see the measure of their importance, and in their silence we hear the echo of a golden age long gone. There is a certain tragedy in returning home. Time warps it. Memory idealizes it. You come back with the dust of war on your armor and the blood of brothers on your hands, expecting to find peace. You expect something unchanged, but what greets you is never quite what you left behind. For Lion L. Johnson, Primarch of the First Legion, that return was a fall, not from grace, but into sorrow, betrayal, and myth. The Lion was not like his brothers, cold where others were warm, calculating where others were passionate. Even among demigods, he was distant, an aloof presence, always thinking 5 moves ahead. He wore the mask of a knight, but wielded the mind of a tactician. His loyalty to the Emperor was never in doubt, but to the men around him. Even that loyalty was a blade with 2 edges. When the Horus Heresy ignited, the Lion did not fight at Terra. He fought elsewhere, deep in the void, far from the throne of their father. He waged his own brutal war, intercepting traitor supply lines, outmaneuvering chaos fleets, and clashing with the Night Lords in a shadow war that left entire sectors burning. His was not the path of glory, but of grim necessity. And while he fought with brutal efficiency, his thoughts turned ever homeward, to Caliban. Caliban, a forest world shrouded in perpetual twilight, where beasts born of nightmare stalked the wilds, and humanity clung to survival within fortress monasteries. It was there that the Lion had first drawn breath, found by the warrior monks of the Order. Raised among them, he learned discipline and strategy like other children learn laughter. Even before the Emperor came, the Lion was a leader of men, stern, distant, but peerless in war. When the Emperor arrived, the Lion bowed. He accepted command of the First Legion, the Dark Angels, and left Caliban behind, entrusting it to his foster brother and closest companion, Luther. That was the mistake. Luther was the mirror of the Lion, charismatic where the Lion was silent, passionate where he was reserved. They had fought together, bled together. But when the Emperor chose the Lion for ascension, Luther remained behind, honored, but ultimately sidelined, and bitterness like a slow poison began to seep into his heart. By the time the Lion returned to Caliban after the heresy, he came not as a son of the soil, but as a conquering hero. He expected banners. He found gunfire. The orbital batteries on Caliban opened fire without warning. Defense lasers, macro cannons, missile silos all turned skyward, targeting the ships of the First Legion. Vessels disintegrated. Brothers died in flame. Vox links crackled with disbelief. Had the traitors followed them here? Had chaos taken Caliban? The truth was worse. It was Luther. The man who had once sworn to protect Caliban in the Lion's absence had turned it into a fortress of rebellion. Empowered by whispers in the warp, seduced by chaos he may not have even fully understood, he had twisted the Order's remnants into a cult of bitterness and vengeance. He told them the Lion had abandoned them, had abandoned Caliban, that the First Legion cared more for distant stars than the people of their homeworld. Some of them believed him. Others followed him out of fear. As the fleet reeled from the treachery, the Lion acted. He did not hesitate. He led an assault upon the surface, carving through the defensive screen with grim precision. Drop pods fell like meteors into Caliban's forests. The ancient trees, home to monsters older than human memory, were once again lit with fire. The Lion descended into war. The surface of Caliban was chaos. The cities of the faithful burned. Fortresses cracked and collapsed beneath the fury of orbital bombardments. The rebels, calling themselves the True Angels, fought with fanaticism, but they were no match for the wrath of the First Legion. The Dark Angels struck like their namesake, black-winged and terrible. And at the center of it all, in the halls of Eternum, the ancient monastery of the Order, the Lion hunted his brother. It was not a duel of honor. It was not a confrontation born of understanding. It was a reckoning. The two met beneath the broken stained glass of the great chapel where they had once knelt as children. Now the windows were shattered, statues lay in ruins, and Luther stood alone, clad in war plate not of imperial design, eyes alight with unnatural fire. He accused the Lion of pride, of abandonment, of becoming more machine than man. He spoke of voices that had shown him truths, of gods in the warp who promised a new future. He said he had been chosen. The Lion said nothing. He drew his blade. The battle between the brothers was not just physical, it was spiritual. As their swords clashed, the warp itself screamed. The echoes of their combat cracked the walls of reality, one fighting for redemption, the other for relevance. The Lion fought like a force of nature, all cold precision and unstoppable will. But Luther, twisted by the gods of the warp, was more than mortal. Strength and madness surged through his limbs. They fought for hours, or perhaps minutes. Time bled in that place, and then it ended. Luther struck down the Lion, not with skill, not with power, but with grief. The wound was not mortal, not in the way a cut to the flesh is, but something in the Lion broke. Some deep part of him, already weary from years of war, from the burden of command, from the silence of guilt, gave way. As he fell, the warp responded. Caliban screamed. The warp tore through the planet's crust, rending it apart. Warp storms erupted from the core, swallowing forests, cities, oceans. The world cracked like a stone struck by a titan. The bombardment from orbit ceased, but it was too late. Caliban was dying. The remnants of the Dark Angels fled. They carried what they could, survivors, records, gene seed. And in the ruins of the monastery, among the broken stones and the howling winds, they found Luther, alive, unscathed, and weeping. He repeated one thing over and over: he forgave me. And that perhaps was the cruelest cut. No body was found. No armor, no blade. The lion had vanished, into the warp, into death, into legend. The Dark Angels took the largest surviving fragment of Caliban and turned it into the Rock, a fortress monastery that drifted through the stars like a grave. Within its deepest vaults, watched over by the enigmatic watchers in the dark, the truth was hidden. The lion lived, broken, perhaps, sleeping, but alive. He was placed in stasis, his wounds tended by beings whose names no mortal knows. Even his sons were not told. It was a secret kept for 10,000 years, and in that silence the myth grew. The lion, first of the Primarchs, betrayed by blood, lost in the fires of his homeworld. Some say he was punished for his pride, others that he chose exile. The Dark Angels speak of him only in whispers. They hunt the fallen, those who turned with Luther, not for vengeance, but for absolution. For if the last of them are found, perhaps the lion will wake. Until then, he sleeps, beneath black stone, watched by shadows, waiting. Some secrets are not buried. They are entombed, hidden not just from the world, but from time itself. Locked away behind layers of silence and myth so dense that they blur the line between truth and legend. Among the most guarded of these secrets is this: Lion L. Johnson is not dead. He sleeps, and those who watch over him are not men. They are not even entirely of this galaxy. They are the Watchers in the dark. To understand the Watchers is to peer through a glass blackened by age and soot, where shapes shift and meanings slip like fog. They are old, older than Caliban. Older, some whisper, than mankind's memory. Cloaked in tattered robes and small in stature, they walk without sound and speak in riddles. They were never warriors, never rulers, but they were there in the forests of Caliban long before the lion ever came. Before man there were monsters, and before monsters there were the Watchers. The stories passed down in half-believed superstition claimed they were forest spirits, guardians of balance, shepherds of the natural order. But when the Emperor's sons came to Caliban and the warp began to touch the world more deeply, it became clear they were something more, something other. The lion encountered them during his youth. Even before the Emperor arrived to reclaim his lost son, L. Johnson had wandered the forests alone, hunting beasts, studying ruins, dreaming of something greater than the stone walls of the Order. In those days, the Watchers observed him, hidden in the branches, their black lenses gleaming softly in the shadows. They knew what he was, long before he did. They did not try to guide him. They did not try to stop him. They simply watched. It is said the Watchers understood that the lion would shape Caliban's fate, that he was the tipping point in a war older than humanity. They had seen the signs in the trees, in the wind, in the bones of the ancient worms buried beneath the roots. Perhaps they saw that he would rise and fall, that he would break and one day need to be preserved. So they made a vow, wordless and absolute. When the time came, they would keep him safe. And when Caliban burned, they acted. No living soul knows how they found him in the ruins. The world was a dying carcass, split apart by the rift of the warp. Caliban's forests were scorched, its cities were dust. The fortress monastery where the lion and Luther had fought was nothing more than cracked stone and shattered memory. But the Watchers were not hindered by fire or ruin. They walked through the destruction as if they had been there all along. Perhaps they had. The lion's body lay crumpled in a crater of obsidian glass, half buried beneath fallen masonry. His armor was ruined, his blade was missing, his pulse was a flicker. The lion should have died, but the Watchers would not let him. Moving without haste, without panic, they lifted his broken form from the earth. He was a giant, even in his most vulnerable state. Yet they bore him with the gentleness of ancient servants, handling a sacred relic. As storms raged above and the last fragments of Caliban collapsed into the void, the Watchers carried the lion into the tunnels beneath the wreckage, down into chambers so old they predated mankind's presence on the planet. There, in the deepest vault of the rock, they built his tomb. Not a coffin, but a sanctuary, a chamber of stasis suspended beyond time's reach. It is no sarcophagus of stone or iron, but something more intricate, woven from psychic fields and memory, cloaked in ritual that predates the Emperor himself. In this sanctum, the lion does not decay. He does not age. He does not dream. He waits. And always the Watchers are with him. They do not speak, not in words, not to the dark angels, and not even to those who have proven themselves worthy of the inner circle, the innermost ranks of the chapter who know fragments of the truth. The Watchers are presence more than people. They come and go without notice. Sometimes they drift through the fortress halls, seen only for a moment in the corner of a warrior's eye. Other times they stand silently in meditation, flanking the vault like statues woven from starlight and night. The Dark Angels have learned not to question them. Over the millennia, they have become used to the Watchers' silent stewardship. They are protectors of the tomb, guardians of a truth that even the chapter struggles to bear. Because the truth is this: the lion is not dead. He did not fall as Sanguinius did, or vanish like Dorn. He remains. Some of the Dark Angels believe that his slumber is healing, that the wound Luther dealt him was more spiritual than physical, and the Watchers are waiting for the lion's soul to mend before waking him. Others believe he cannot wake until the chapter has redeemed itself, until the fallen, those Dark Angels who sided with Luther during the betrayal, are found and brought to justice. And there are darker whispers still. Some say the Watchers are not servants at all, but jailers, that they keep the lion hidden, not to protect him, but to protect the galaxy from what he has become. That in the moment Luther struck him down, something broke inside the first son, that he saw something in the warp, something that changed him, something terrible. The truth, as always, is obscured. But there are signs. In moments of dire need, when the rock faces danger, some have claimed to feel a presence, like a second heartbeat in the stone. Tech Marines have reported phantom energy readings near the sealed vault. Librarians have spoken of dreams in which the lion walks the halls again, his eyes alight with something vast and unknowable. Still, the Watchers do not speak. They tend the stasis tomb, their tiny hands moving with precision as they make adjustments no human could comprehend. They never interfere with the chapter's actions unless the threat touches the vault. Then, and only then, they act. There is a record, hidden deep within the librarium's restricted texts, of an incident nearly 4,000 years ago. A demon, summoned through an unsanctioned warp ritual aboard the rock, managed to breach 3 secure levels. It was carving a path straight toward the Primarch's vault. The Dark Angels were minutes away from disaster, and then the Watchers intervened. They did not fight with weapons. They did not need to. The air cracked, the ship screamed. Every living soul nearby was knocked unconscious, and when they awoke, the demon was gone, burned away not by fire but by will. The Watchers returned to their places. No explanation, no acknowledgement. Since then, even the most skeptical among the inner circle have learned reverence. And so the First Legion waits. They hunt the fallen with fanatical zeal, believing, hoping that with each traitor brought low, they draw closer to atonement. Closer to the day when the Watchers will allow the vault to open. Closer to the moment when the lion will awaken, and the galaxy will know once more the fury of the first sun. The galaxy does not know he sleeps. The Imperium believes him dead. But within the heart of the rock, in a chamber untouched by time or war, the lion lies still. And in the shadows around him, eyes gleam beneath cowled hoods. The Watchers endure. They will wait for 10,000 years more, if they must, because their task is eternal, and their charge sacred. When the skies over Istvan turned black, and the land ran red with the blood of Astartes, something inside Corvus Corax began to die. It wasn't the horror of the ambush, though that alone was unspeakable. It wasn't even the knowledge that 9 legions had betrayed the Emperor. What broke the Primarch of the Raven Guard was deeper, more personal. It was betrayal by kin, a shattering of trust so profound that the wounds it left behind never truly healed. Corvus Corax had always walked the knife edge between the righteous and the ruthless. Where others found glory in battle, Corax saw only necessity. His legions struck from the shadows, swift and precise, eliminating threats before they became wars. He saw himself not as a warlord, but as a surgeon cutting out the cancer of rebellion. War was not glory, it was amputation. Born on the prison world of Lycaeus, Corax grew up amid shackles and blood. Raised in the darkness of slave pens, he learned that justice was not given, it was taken. When he led a rebellion and freed his world from tyranny, he did it not with speeches or banners, but with assassination and fire. He brought liberation not through diplomacy, but through death. When the Emperor found him, Corax had already become a myth, a pale shadow who moved unseen, delivering justice from the dark. That darkness, always within him, only grew deeper after Istvan V. The drop site massacre was a trap laid with exquisite cruelty. The Raven Guard, along with the Salamanders and Iron Hands, were lured into a joint assault on Horus's forces under the guise of a coordinated Loyalist strike. The traitors, sons of the Emperor who had already pledged themselves to the ruinous powers, waited until the Loyalists were fully committed to the attack, and then they turned. The Iron Warriors, the Word Bearers, the Night Lords, the Alpha Legion, all unleashed their fury on the Loyalists. Legions who had stood side by side through 100 campaigns now butchered their brothers with delight. The skies filled with fire, the air was choked with screams. Corax fought like a man possessed. His wings, fashioned from arcane technology, cut through the smoke like scythes. He struck with blade and claw, his face a mask of fury. But even he could not stop the tide. The Raven Guard were massacred. They had landed 80,000 strong. Only a few thousand made it back to their ships, and even fewer escaped the system. Corax survived, somehow. Perhaps the warp recoiled from his wrath. Perhaps the Emperor's hand guided his escape. Or perhaps fate wasn't finished with him. He returned to Deliverance, his homeworld, once Lycaeus, dragging with him the remnants of a legion, and a burden of failure so great it would bend a star. But Corax didn't weep, he didn't rage, he went to Terra. He begged the Emperor for aid. And in that moment, the Master of Mankind did something extraordinary. He answered. It is said that the Emperor, in the briefest sliver of time before being confined to the Golden Throne, granted Corax access to something no other Primarch was ever given, the secrets of the gene labs beneath the Imperial Palace. Forbidden knowledge, archaeotech from the dawn of the Imperium, the tools used to make the Primarchs themselves. With this gift, Corax returned to Deliverance with a plan. He would rebuild the Raven Guard, and he would do it fast. What followed was a project born of desperation. Corax and his apothecaries toiled in secret, accelerating the implantation of gene seed, bypassing traditional trials, manipulating growth cycles. Within weeks, new warriors stood in the shadows of the Ravenspire, tall, strong, clad in black. Corax looked upon them and saw a future reborn, but the gift was not without flaw. Some of the new Astartes began to change. At first, it was minor, subtle distortions of the face, irregularities in bone growth. Then came the mutations, elongated limbs, talons instead of fingers, voices that grated like static. Some could barely speak. Others howled like animals. Their minds began to slip, and with them, the dream. Corax was horrified. These were not his sons. They were creations twisted by haste, by incomplete knowledge, perhaps even by the lingering touch of chaos within the gene code itself. Whatever the cause, the result was clear. The experiment had failed, and Corax, silent, solitary Corax, took it upon himself to end them. He walked into the gene labs alone. One by one, he ended the lives of the malformed Astartes, not with hatred, but with mourning. He did not delegate. He did not flinch. He saw it as a penance and perhaps as the only kindness left to him. When the last of them fell, Corax emerged into the cold light of deliverance, a changed man. His armor was black, not the polished obsidian of a parade uniform, but the dull charcoal of a blade used too often. His eyes no longer looked to the stars. They looked inward. For a time, he led the Raven Guard in the final years of the Scouring, striking deep into the warp-tainted zones where traitor warbands still lingered. The Legion's tactics became even more brutal, its movements unpredictable. They struck in silence, left no survivors, and disappeared without a trace. But Corax himself was withdrawing. He stopped attending war councils. He no longer spoke of the future. His interactions with his captains were brief, often wordless. Some claimed he had begun to dream again, but not of the Emperor or victory. He dreamed of Lorgar, the word-bearer Primarch, architect of the heresy's spiritual rot, the man who had poisoned the legions with his false faith. Corax fixated on him. In battle, when Raven Guard warriors encountered word-bearers, Corax took the field personally. He pursued them with merciless fury, cutting them down without pause. And then, he disappeared. The day was unremarkable. There was no grand event, no final speech. Corax walked the halls of the Ravenspire, passing beneath the statues of fallen brothers, the weight of guilt heavy on his shoulders. He left a message with his captains, only one word, nevermore. And he was gone. No ship was logged departing. No witnesses saw him leave. Some thought he had taken his own life in the bowels of the fortress. Others believed he had taken to the void in a lone craft. But the truth was more profound. Corax had entered the warp. Not in madness, not in flight, but in pursuit. He went hunting. Somehow he slipped past the veil of reality and entered the Eye of Terror, the realm of chaos, the very heart of corruption. Most who go there are consumed, others are changed beyond recognition. But not Corax. In that place he became something more. Reports began to surface. Whispers carried by demons screamed from the lips of dying heretics. A shadow that moved between worlds, a taloned wraith that struck word-bearer warbands without warning, tearing through their ranks in moments. No demands, no quarter, only retribution. On one demon world, witnesses claimed to see Corax impale Lorgar himself, the hated Primarch, upon his lightning claws. The word-bearer screamed, fled, vanished into the warp. But the message was clear. The Raven Lord was not finished. Corvus Corax did not die. He did not fade. He became a ghost in the shadows of the Imperium, a living vengeance. And to this day, when traitors whisper of the dark, they speak his name in fear. The one who never forgets, the one who never forgives, nevermore. Not all who disappear are lost. Some simply go where others cannot follow. And for Corvus Corax, the pale king of deliverance, there was nowhere left to run from the weight he carried, except into the mouth of the storm itself. This is the story of a Primarch who walked willingly into damnation, not to be devoured by it, but to defy it. To wage a war not of planets or conquests, but of shadows, whispers, and vengeance. It is a war that continues, still. It began in silence. The word Corax left behind before vanishing, nevermore. was not just a farewell, it was a statement of intent. It was the final punctuation mark in a soul unraveling. His legion had been butchered. His attempts to rebuild had ended in horror, and the traitors, the ones who had orchestrated the massacre at Istvan Forth, still lived. So he would find them, and he would unmake them. But not as a general, and not with armies. He would become something else, something the enemy could neither predict nor prepare for. A revenant. In the years following the end of the Scouring, strange rumors began to reach the ears of inquisitors, astropaths, and rogue traders who lingered too long near the borders of the Eye of Terror. Reports of demonic warbands, word-bearers, Alpha Legionnaires, even Black Legion elements found slaughtered, left in ruin. No patterns, no warnings, just a sudden eruption of violence that left no survivors and vanished without a trace. They spoke of a shadow that moved too fast for the eye to follow, of a figure with wings of shadow, not of matter or machine, but seemingly torn from the fabric of the warp itself. Talons like living obsidian, a presence that chilled even the demonic. At first, many dismissed the stories as the usual madness that clings to the edges of chaos, but some among the Raven Guard heard and recognized what others dismissed. They said nothing. They merely looked to the stars and waited. You see, Corax had not only crossed into the Eye of Terror, he had allowed it to touch him, but on his own terms. Unlike others who had entered that nightmarish dimension and been twisted by it, Corax retained his mind. It did not break him. It did not seduce him. He did not bow before its gods. He hated them too purely, too fiercely. That hate became a weapon. The warp is shaped by belief, by will, by identity, and in the mind of Corax, there was no room for temptation, only retribution. The warp made him more than mortal, more than Primarch. It made him myth. It began with word-bearer patrols, small fleets that vanished without a distress call, then warbands, then shrines, whole demon worlds once consecrated to chaos. Undivided were found desecrated, their icons shattered, their skies blackened by storms not of chaos's making, but his. Corax moved like an executioner in a realm built on madness. No logic, no tactics as the Imperium understood them. Just the cold, methodical stalking of one who had long since left humanity behind. Not physically, no, he was still recognizably Corax if you saw him closely, but in purpose, in essence. He no longer fought for Terra, nor even for the Emperor. He fought for his legion. Each strike, each act of sabotage, each demon blade shattered in his grip. These were not random acts of vengeance. They were penance. But the Raven Lord's focus narrowed to one name above all others. Lorgar Aurelian, the arch-heretic, the father of the Word-bearers, the first Primarch to fall, and perhaps the most dangerous, for he fell not out of anger, but faith. It was Lorgar who lit the match that burned the galaxy. It was Lorgar whose sermons and secret rituals paved the way for Horus's damnation. Corax had hated him since the moment Istvan burned, not for his strength, but for the belief he spread, lies dressed in scripture. The hatred grew in silence like a black root twisting around Corax's soul. He would find Lorgar, and when he did, he would do what the Emperor did not. He would end him. And so, within the shifting labyrinth of the Eye, Corax hunted. Years passed, perhaps decades. Time flows strangely in the warp, but eventually, on a world without name, built from ruined cathedrals and bones, they met. It was not a battle of armies. It was not witnessed. It is known only through the tortured confessions of a demon prince who barely survived, and from half-lost records in the Black Library. Corax arrived as a storm. The planet's skies turned black. The seas boiled. The warp energies Lorgar had used to shield himself bent under the force of Corax's approach, not because of psychic might, but because of will. The sheer weight of Corax's hatred disrupted the flow of sorcery around him. He descended upon the altar mid-ritual, a shadow split by lightning. And the two Primarchs clashed. Lorgar had long since shed his mortal form, wreathed in fire and adorned in scripture carved into his very skin. He towered above the Raven Lord. But Corax had become something else, a weapon of unrelenting silence. He did not roar, he did not mock, he simply attacked. Claw met Crozius, wings met wings, one ethereal and flickering with demonic light, the other void black and hungry. The air screamed with their fury. The earth cracked, demons fled the area, unable to withstand the clashing presence of two sons of the Emperor, one fallen, one unfinished. And then Corax struck Lorgar down. He impaled his brother on lightning claws forged in shadow. There was no final speech, no redemption, only a whisper. "This is for Istvan." But he did not kill him. Lorgar, broken and bleeding Iker, vanished into the warp, spirited away by forces unseen. Perhaps the Chaos Gods intervened. Perhaps he fled. Either way, Corax let him go, not out of mercy, but because vengeance delayed is sweeter. Since that day, Corax has remained within the eye of terror, hunting, stalking. There is no pattern to his appearances. He has struck Black Legion fortresses, slaughtered Alpha Legion operatives, and desecrated temples razed to Slaanesh and Nurgle. He is no longer a tactician. He is not even a Primarch in the traditional sense. He is a curse. Even the demons speak of him, though they do not know his name. They call him the shadow that prays, the raven of nothing, the death that denies. Among the traitor legions, his presence is known not by sight but by absence. Missing squads, empty camps, ships found adrift with their crews gone, no signs of struggle. Corax doesn't leave messages, only silence. And so he remains, a myth within a nightmare, never seen by the Imperium he once defended, never returning to deliverance, never again leading his legion. But those who know, those who dare to believe, whisper that the Raven Lord is still out there, not to save, not to rule, but to destroy, one traitor at a time. And when the last of them is gone, when the stain of Istvan has finally been erased from the galaxy, only then perhaps will Corax speak another word. Until then, there is only one thing he says to the shadows that flee before him: nevermore. In a galaxy of broken dreams and shattered oaths, where even gods bleed and empires burn, Rogal Dorn stood immovable. There was no poetry in him, no flourish, no need for laurels or songs. He was stone-shaped into flesh, duty incarnate. If the Emperor had been the architect of mankind's rise, then Dorn was the keystone that held it all together. Without him, the Imperium would have collapsed under the weight of its own wounds. But even the strongest wall can crack. And when it did, Rogal Dorn did not crumble. He chose to vanish. To understand Dorn is to understand silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of restraint. Where Russ howled and Guilliman planned, Dorn endured. During the Great Crusade, he spoke rarely and never for effect. Every word was measured, every decision weighed against one scale: duty. His warriors revered him not for his charisma, but for the way he embodied the unbending ideal of the Imperium. He was the Praetorian of Terra, and he never once stepped away from the ramparts. When the Horus Heresy broke the galaxy's spine, Dorn did not falter. He didn't question, didn't hesitate. While others were racked with doubt or torn between loyalty and love, Dorn stood tall. He fortified the Imperial Palace, knowing full well that he was building a tomb, not just for others, but perhaps for himself. He watched the skies darken with the ships of traitor brothers, and he made no speeches. He gave orders. Thousands of his warriors died on those walls. Thousands more lived because of them. Through it all, he never flinched, even as blood soaked the golden halls of the Emperor's seat, even as Sanguinius fell and Horus struck the killing blow. Dorn remained focused. When the battle ended and the Emperor was bound forever to the Golden Throne, it was Dorn who bore his shattered body across the bridge of the vengeful spirit, his gauntlets slick with the blood of gods, his voice a whisper over the dying breath of the master of mankind. It broke something in him, not visibly, not openly, but something deep. Others might have collapsed into grief. Dorn turned to purpose. In the years following the heresy, Dorn became the Imperium's executioner. Not in emotion, but in effect. He took the Imperial fists, already a legion of discipline and attrition, and forged them into a vengeful blade. He led the Great Scouring, hunting down the traitor legions as they fled into the Eye of Terror. Every battle he fought was a reckoning. There was no forgiveness, only judgment. But it wasn't enough. Even as the Scouring waged on, the Imperium itself began to fray. Old battle lines gave way to new tensions. At the heart of it all was Roboute Guilliman, returned to his empire in ruin with a vision, the Codex Astartes. Guilliman's idea was simple, dangerous, but simple. Divide the legions, reduce their size, prevent any one man, any one Primarch, from ever again wielding enough power to challenge the Emperor. Dorn despised it. To him, the legions weren't just tools. They were his sons. They were oaths made manifest, chains of legacy bound by blood and war. He hadn't kept them alive through the siege just to break them apart in the cold light of bureaucratic fear. The argument that followed nearly ignited another civil war. Guilliman stood for reform. Dorn stood for tradition. The lines were drawn, tempers rose. In the shadows of terror, rumors swirled that Dorn might go rogue, might fracture the Imperium with the force of his will. Instead, Dorn chose a different form of protest. He chose sacrifice. The world was Sebastus IV, a demon-infested fortress planet claimed by Perturabo, the bitter brother who had once been his mirror. During the heresy, Perturabo had goaded Dorn into attacking the Fortress of Eternal Iron, a trap that cost thousands of lives. Dorn never forgot, never forgave. So when word came that the Iron Warriors had resurfaced on Sebastus IV, Dorn didn't hesitate. He launched the assault personally. And in doing so, he made a point. He would show Guilliman what it meant to be Legion. The Iron Cage, as it came to be known, was one of the bloodiest battles in post-heresy history. The fortress world was a nightmare of razor-edged trenches, underground labyrinths, and warp-tainted kill zones. Dorn threw his sons into the grinder, and he led them from the front. For weeks, the Imperial fists assaulted the fortress again and again. They died in droves. It was siege warfare at its most suicidal. But Dorn wouldn't stop, not until the planet was reduced to ash, not until the Iron Warriors were gone. It took the arrival of Guilliman himself to pull Dorn back. The Ultramarines had come to save the Imperial fists from extinction. Guilliman found Dorn bloodied and unbowed on the front lines, commanding from a trench half filled with the corpses of his kin. The two Primarchs locked eyes. Words passed between them, but none were recorded. What mattered was this: Dorn relented. After the Iron Cage, the Imperial fists were broken apart into smaller chapters. The Codex Astartes was adopted. The Imperium moved forward, but Dorn never truly returned. He kept fighting, of course. The traitors still lingered. Chaos raids intensified, even as the other surviving Primarchs began to vanish, into exile, into sleep, into myth. Dorn remained. He took the mantle none of them wanted, last watchman of the throne. He stopped appearing at council. He stopped writing treatises or engaging in politics. He built fortresses, bastions, shipyards, bulwarks of steel and fire. Everywhere chaos might strike, Dorn left a wall behind, until one day a new threat emerged. A black fleet, tainted by chaos, emerged from the Eye of Terror and began its silent path toward Terra. It moved with purpose, as though guided by a familiar hand. Its flagship, a monstrous despoiler-class warship called the Sword of Sacrilege, was unlike any vessel ever charted. Drenched in warp energies, wreathed in screaming sigils, a ghost ship of heresy. Dorn responded the only way he knew how. He launched a counterattack. No grand crusade, no theater of war, just the Phalanx, his own fortress ship, and a strike force drawn from his most loyal sons. This was no campaign. This was a board and burn mission. A final reckoning. The fleets met in the void above the dead world of Idumea, a shattered planet long abandoned to silence. The Sword of Sacrilege carved a path through the Phalanx's outer defenses like a blade through parchment. Warp storms flared around it. Lesser men might have balked. Dorn ordered the assault teams to deploy. He led the charge. Armored in golden ceramite, blade in hand, Rogal Dorn personally spearheaded the boarding action. They punched through the outer hull, carving a path toward the bridge. Room by room, hallway by hallway, Dorn carved his way through nightmares, mutated Astartes, demon spawn, techno-abominations wired into the ship's core. The last known Vox communication from Dorn came from the bridge of the Sword of Sacrilege. "We hold here. This ship dies today." Then, silence. When the Phalanx finally overran the ship's defenses and secured the wreck, they found no trace of Dorn, only a single relic. His hand, skeletal and scorched, still clutching the hilt of a shattered chainsword. The bones were identified, marked with his personal scrimshaw, carried back to Terra and placed in stasis, enshrined aboard the Phalanx itself. To this day, the Hand of Dorn remains a symbol of sacrifice and eternal vigilance. The official record lists Rogal Dorn as killed in action, but not all believe that. Some whisper that he did not die, that he was taken into the warp, body and soul. Others believe he survived, wounded and hidden, walking among the stars unseen, still guarding the Imperium from afar. Whatever the truth, Rogal Dorn is gone. But his legacy is not. It endures in fortress monasteries that still hold against impossible odds, in the chapters that bear his gene seed and fight with his grim determination, and in the silence between the battles, where every warrior of the Imperial Fists listens for the voice of their Primarch, the voice that never broke, even as the galaxy did. He was the last son to stand watch, the unyielding defender. And one day the wall may rise again. It is said that a fortress is only as strong as the will behind its walls. If that is true, then Rogal Dorn was a citadel unto himself, unyielding, unwavering, and impossible to breach. But walls do not last forever, and even the strongest ramparts fade, not with a cry, but with a whisper. That is how the Praetorian of Terra vanished. No martyrdom, no grand procession, no heroic death etched into marble by grateful hands. Just the slow erasure of a name that once carried the weight of worlds. The final chapter of Dorn's life is a paradox, a story defined by what isn't known. It is not a tale of a dying breath, but of a final step taken into legend, one that left behind more questions than answers, and a silence that still echoes through the soul of every warrior who bears his gene seed. But to understand his disappearance, you must first understand how Dorn lived in his final years. After the brutal slaughter of the Iron Cage, a siege so catastrophic it nearly destroyed the Imperial Fists, Dorn seemed to shed what little remained of the man he once was. He no longer debated, no longer wrote in his famously concise journals. He became something colder, not unfeeling, but focused beyond emotion. He was not there to lead the Imperium into peace. He was there to hold it together by force, if necessary. He remained in orbit over Terra aboard the mighty Phalanx, the vast star fort that had become both weapon and temple. From there, he watched the stars. Not idly, not wistfully. He watched with the intensity of a man scanning the horizon for the next siege. He knew something was coming. Not just skirmishes, not isolated wars, something vast, something inevitable. The Imperium of the 32nd millennium was still young, but it was already creaking under its own weight. Bureaucracy festered. Dissent stirred in 100 systems. The traitors were gone, yes, but only hidden, not dead. Dorn understood this. The heresy was a wound that would never fully heal, and while others focused on mending, he turned to fortification. Preparation. His final campaign would be waged not on soil, but in the black between stars. The threat came from deep space, a massive, warp-tainted armada, the likes of which had not been seen since the Great Scouring, was identified moving through the eastern fringe. It bore no banners. Its ships were angular, cruel, and choked with blasphemous symbols etched in fire. Vox hailings returned only static or shrieking laughter. The Adeptus Mechanicus named its flagship the Sword of Sacrilege, a despoiler-class warship unlike any in their databases. But Dorn, he recognized it. Not the ship itself, but the design. This was not a random chaos incursion. This was deliberate. It moved not in chaos, but in formation. It did not rampage, it patrolled, it searched, it hunted, and so Dorn did what he had always done. He acted. He assembled a strike force, not an army, not a crusade, but a precise and potent spearhead drawn from the finest survivors of the post-Codex Imperial Fists and their successor chapters. There were no speeches, no promises of glory, only orders, brief and absolute. They would strike first. The Phalanx and its attendant ships jumped into the void, leaving behind Terra's orbit for the last time. As the stars stretched and the warp bled into vision, few among the fleet realized this would be the last known journey of Rogal Dorn, the last recorded sighting of the last loyal Primarch active in the galaxy. The confrontation took place in an uncharted dead zone, an ancient system without name, its planets long ago stripped to stone and silence. It was a place forgotten by all but fate. The fleets clashed in orbit over a shattered planetoid, its surface cracked by tectonic convulsions, its sky split by auroras of warp energy. The Sword of Sacrilege led the Chaos formation. It was a thing of horror, its hull breathing like flesh, its gun ports wreathed in fire, its Vox signals a constant drone of tortured voices. Dorn saw it for what it was, a taunt. This was no mere warship. It was a lure, a challenge, a mirror dark and twisted, held up to the Praetorian by those who had once called him brother. He ordered a boarding action. Aboard the Phalanx, he donned his armor, golden and unblemished, carved with the sigils of Terra, unadorned by vanity. He wielded his personal power blade and stormbolter. He said nothing as he entered the drop hold. His sons gathered behind him, silent as statues, ready to follow their Primarch into hell. And into hell they went. The boarding torpedoes struck like hammers into the hull of the Sword of Sacrilege. The breach was violent, the corridors alive with writhing cables and pulsing walls. The ship's interior defied geometry, chambers too vast to fit inside, staircases that doubled back on themselves. It was not just a vessel, it was a temple. The chaos forces within were monstrous, corrupted Astartes clad in flayed armor, demon engines prowling the halls on talons of bronze and bone. But Dorn carved a path through them. He fought like a machine of war, his blade severing limbs, his bolter roaring with the fury of a dying Imperium. And always he moved forward, toward the bridge. The final Vox transmission from Dorn was short. Recorded by a battle brother who fell moments later, it survives as a relic of pure, grim defiance. They do not pass. This ends now. Then, silence. The boarding party reached the bridge and found carnage. Chaos champions lay dead. The bulkheads were torn apart by something inhumanly strong. The air reeked of ozone and ichor. But there was no sign of Dorn, only a single terrible artifact, a severed hand resting atop the smashed control lectern, still gripping the haft of a broken weapon. The armor was unmistakable. The scrimshaw etched into the bones, prayers, litanies, names of every chapter master of the Imperial Fists, made it undeniable. It was his. The hand was placed in stasis and returned to the phalanx. It rests there still, encased in a shrine aboard the eternal bridge of the fortress ship. No one speaks in that chamber. No one dares, because the questions are too many, too loud. If Dorn fell, where is his body? If he was taken, who has him? And if he still lives, why hasn't he come back? The Imperial Fists declared him missing in action, never dead, never fully gone, because they can't accept it. Because to admit his loss would be to admit that the last wall has fallen, that no one is left watching over Terra, over them. So they carry on, they build, they fight, they defend, and in every bolter volley, in every stone placed into a fortress wall, in every defiant last stand, they whisper his name, not in mourning but in expectation, because Rogal Dorn never broke, and the sons of the Praetorian believe with every fiber of their being that he never will. Somewhere beyond the stars, beyond logic, beyond time, the last wall still stands, waiting. He was not the loudest. He was not the wildest. He did not bleed poetry like Sanguinius or burn with wrath like Russ. But Roboute Guilliman was a force that shaped the galaxy all the same, quietly, patiently, and with the relentless pressure of a glacier crushing mountains beneath its weight. He was the Emperor's chosen architect of order, and when all else had collapsed into ruin, when brother turned against brother and the stars ran red with betrayal, it was Guilliman who stood among the ashes and began to build. He had not wanted the title, Avenging Son. It was given to him by those desperate to see vengeance as leadership, to find purpose in retaliation. But Guilliman had never been driven by rage. He was driven by responsibility. And after the Horus Heresy, that burden became incalculable. While Terra mourned and the High Lord stumbled through the fog of bureaucracy and grief, Guilliman returned to Ultramar, the vast stellar empire he had built long before the heresy ever began. Even during the Great Crusade, it had stood apart, not a war zone, but a beacon, a region governed not by the lash, but by law. Under Guilliman's leadership, it had flourished in education, commerce, and military strength. When the Imperium fractured, Ultramar did not break, it endured. And now it became a sanctuary. Refugees from across the stars poured into Guilliman's domain. Governors, soldiers, scribes, and civilians who had survived the heresy's fires. They looked to him not just as a warrior, but as a ruler, the only surviving Primarch still commanding an empire. And Guilliman, who had always understood that power must serve people, not the reverse, answered that call. He did not retreat. He did not isolate himself in mourning. He went to work. Within years, what would become known as the Imperium Secundus had taken form, not as a rebellion against Terra, but as a lifeboat, a bulwark against a galaxy descending into madness. Guilliman stabilized crumbling supply lines. He reorganized scattered fleets. He restored order to worlds that had known only chaos since the War Master's rebellion. He never called himself Emperor, but some whispered it, quietly, hopefully. Even his brothers had rallied to his side. Sanguinius, radiant even in despair, stood by him in the founding of this second Imperium. So too did Lionel Johnson, brooding and secretive. For a brief moment it seemed that hope might take root again, that even if the Emperor was broken, his sons might still lead. But it was not to last. Terra, it turned out, had not fallen. The Astronomicon still burned. The Emperor still lived, though at a terrible cost. Guilliman, upon learning this, did not hesitate. He dissolved the Imperium Secundus and committed himself wholly to the restoration of the true Imperium. He would never again be accused of usurpation, and so the avenging son took up the blade of duty once more, not for vengeance, not for ambition, but for necessity. He led the Scouring, that vast and final campaign, to hunt down the traitor legions scattered in the aftermath of Horus's death. It was not a war of glory, it was a cleansing. Every world touched by chaos was purged, every stronghold, every warp-tainted ruin, every traitor remnant hunted to extinction. Guilliman's campaigns were precise, relentless, surgical. There was no joy in them, only justice. He became not just the last active Primarch, but the de facto ruler of the Imperium. The High Lords, though they chafed under his presence, could not match his intellect, his command of logistics, his sheer capacity for administration. He was more than a general. He was the Emperor's shadow, walking still among men. And then came the wound. The planet was Thessala, a ruined jewel of the eastern fringe, twisted by war and blighted by sorcery. The Emperor's children had claimed it, those sick mockeries of warriors who once followed Fulgrim, now Demon Prince of Slaanesh. It was said Fulgrim had returned there to perform some obscene rite, a ritual born of pride and madness. Guilliman came not just to crush a threat, but to confront a brother. The two had clashed before. Fulgrim had been brilliant once, a warrior artist whose passion rivaled Guilliman's precision. But now he was something else, a serpentine monstrosity, his flesh a shifting canvas of excess, his voice a melody that flayed the soul. Their duel was nothing like the Emperor and Horus. No cosmic stakes, no golden throne looming in the background, just two brothers, both fallen in different ways, facing the ruin of everything they had once been. Fulgrim moved with demonic speed, each strike a blur of motion and madness. Guilliman countered with calm precision, each parry a lesson in restraint. But in the end it was not enough. The wound came quick, a blade kissed by chaos, sliding into the gap of Guilliman's gorget, tearing through the flesh of his neck. A mortal wound, a final act. Fulgrim fled, cackling, his demon form dissolving into the warp, and Guilliman collapsed. The Ultramarines found him moments later, barely clinging to life. His blood, once the lifeblood of an empire, poured across the stone like ink spilled on a forgotten ledger. Apothecaries worked frantically, chaplains knelt. No prayers reached the Emperor. Only cold reality remained. He was not dead, but he would never wake again. They carried him back to Macragge, to the heart of Ultramar, and placed him upon a throne, not of power, but of preservation. A stasis field encased him in the exact moment before death, his wound eternally open, his eyes forever closed, and there he sat, not as a leader, not as a god, but as a relic, for 10,000 years. In the center of the Temple of Correction, surrounded by marble statues and flickering torchlight, Roboute Guilliman became a symbol, a monument to the age that was lost, to order abandoned. Pilgrims came from across the Imperium to gaze upon his silent form. They wept, they prayed. Some claimed they saw his lips twitch, others that the blood in his wound glowed faintly when chaos approached. None of it mattered. He did not move. The Imperium changed. It decayed. The High Lords became kings in all but name. The bureaucracy bloated, corrupted. His Codex Astartes was twisted, misinterpreted, diluted. The dream of a rational Imperium, an organized galaxy, drowned beneath red tape and incense smoke. But Guilliman remained, a quiet accusation in the heart of his empire. Some say it was mercy that he did not see what his Imperium had become. Others say it was cruelty. The Ultramarines never stopped watching him, never stopped waiting. They fought on with discipline and purpose, keeping alive his ideals in a galaxy that no longer understood them. They called him the Avenging Sun, but in truth, he had never been about vengeance. He had been about structure, order, hope born not from miracles but from systems that worked. And now those systems faltered. The stars grew darker, the rift in the galaxy widened, chaos returned, bolder than ever. And still the throne remained occupied by a figure frozen in time, silent, enduring, waiting, but perhaps not forever. Because some relics are not just preserved, some are placed aside for the moment they are needed most. And there are those who believe even now that the Avenging Sun has not yet completed his work, that his last breath has not yet been drawn, that his final ledger remains unfinished, and that somewhere deep within the eternal moment of stasis, Roboute Guilliman is still calculating the cost of saving mankind, one breath away from rising. In the cold heart of Macragge, beneath stone-vaulted ceilings and flickering lumen lamps, there is a throne that holds no power. It bears no crown, no scepter, no commands, only silence. It is a throne of suspension, not sovereignty, a stasis field caught between life and death, between past and future. And upon that throne sits Roboute Guilliman, Lord of Ultramar, avenging son of the Emperor, entombed not once, but 3 times. The first was of flesh, when a demon blade kissed his neck and cut down the last son of the Emperor, still actively shaping the Imperium. The second was of time, as he was sealed in a temporal bubble where the clock does not tick and no blood spills beyond the moment of wounding. And the third was of myth, as he became not a man but a legend, frozen in the minds of his people like a constellation, distant, untouchable, mourned not because he had died, but because he could no longer speak. To understand the weight of his stasis, you must walk the long corridors of the Temple of Correction. It was once a command chamber, a war room. Now it is a shrine. The marble floors gleam under the boots of silent guards. The air is heavy with incense that never seems to burn away. Pilgrims shuffle forward on their knees, lips murmuring prayers not to the Emperor, but to him, to the man who could have saved them, to the man who might still. Guilliman is seated upon a throne of adamantium and marble, arms resting on lion-carved armrests, his armor still burnished blue and gold, untouched by time. His head is bowed as if in contemplation, but his eyes remain closed. The wound on his throat, where Fulgrim's blade sliced through armor and sinew, remains forever open, frozen in the moment just before death. The stasis field that surrounds him pulses faintly, a halo of static, a ghost of frozen light. Time does not move inside it. Not truly. There is no heartbeat, no flicker of breath. But his body does not decay, his blood does not congeal. It simply hangs there, suspended in the stillness like a prayer left unanswered. The Ultramarines call it the Eternal Vigil. Others call it a curse. To most, stasis is a tool of preservation, used to delay death or await rescue. To Guilliman, it became a prison of purpose. For 10,000 years, he sat frozen in the final instant of failure. Not death, failure. That was the part no one dared speak aloud, because he had survived everything. The Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, the political quagmires of post-heresy terror, and the scouring that followed. He had tried to make sense of the chaos that remained, to forge law where only vengeance and grief remained. And in the end, it hadn't been war that ended him. It was a single blow from a brother who had become something monstrous. And now he remained frozen in that instant, a king in mid-fall, a general who never gave his final order. But not all was still. The Temple of Correction became a beacon, not of light, but of memory. Over centuries it transformed, from a war chamber to a chapel, from a chapel to a sanctuary, then to a pilgrimage site. Pilgrims came from across the Imperium, walking for months, years, entire lifetimes, just to see the avenging sun. They knelt before the stasis field. They sang hymns. Some left relics, finger bones of saints, scraps of Lorgar burned texts, trinkets carved with his sigil. It was not just the faithful. Inquisitors came, cloaked and silent. Tech priests scanned him for changes. Sisters of silence stood vigil in case the warp stirred. Even those within the Adeptus Astartes, his own successors, treated the shrine with reverence tinged with desperation. Because in that frozen chamber, the galaxy kept a secret. Hope had a name, and that name was Roboute Guilliman. But as the millennia crawled forward, that hope began to sour. The Imperium changed, and not for the better. What Guilliman had once tried to shape into an efficient, just empire had become something else entirely. The Imperium of mankind became the ecclesiarchy's cathedral state, where science was heresy and blind faith became law. His Codex Astartes, written as a manual of military discipline and restraint, was now treated as sacred scripture, quoted by chaplains as gospel. Statues of Guilliman were erected on 1,000 worlds, most of them wrong. Some depicted him with flaming wings, others showed him holding the galaxy in his palm, or slaying Horus with a lightning bolt from his eyes. The truth had been consumed by iconography. Guilliman's stasis became a mirror, reflecting back the Imperium's slow descent into religious mania and fossilized tradition. He, the most rational of the Primarchs, was worshipped by madmen who would have burned his living self at the stake for blasphemy. And still he sat unmoving, but not untouched. Every few decades, someone would notice something strange. A pulse in the stasis field, a faint glow around the wound, a twitch in the fingers that could not be explained by machinery. There were no confirmed awakenings, no prophecies fulfilled. But whispers spread that Guilliman was not entirely dormant. Some claimed that his mind was still active, locked in a dreaming state, aware of time, watching helplessly as the galaxy unraveled. Others believed the Emperor had anchored Guilliman's soul, holding it in stasis until the moment it was truly needed. That his wound was not just physical, but spiritual, a tear that could not be healed while the galaxy still bled. And then there were those who feared he should not return. That Guilliman, upon waking, would reject the Imperium he had died to preserve. That he would look upon the ecclesiarchy and the Adeptus Terra and see not guardians of mankind, but parasites. That he would become a second heresy, not by turning to chaos, but by daring to question the throne. The High Lords of Terra had their own reasons for keeping the avenging sun on ice, because if he woke, they might have to answer for 10,000 years of decay. And so he remained, a Primarch in eternal limbo, a leader who could not lead, a soul frozen on the edge of a scream. But even stone erodes, even the impossible bends given time. And in that still chamber on Macragge, within the triune entombment of flesh, time, and legend, something else began to stir. A pressure, a quiet promise, growing ever louder with each decade of darkness. It did not come with trumpets. It did not arrive with fanfare. It began simply with a question. What if he wakes? That was all it took. Because every fortress that still stands, every ultramarine who still fights, every world that holds against the dark, they do not do so because of the Emperor alone. They do so because somewhere, beneath the glow of stasis and the hush of time, Roboute Guilliman waits, and the galaxy trembles at what may happen when the avenging sun opens his eyes. In the frozen reaches of Fenris, where fire dances across the sky and wolves prowl beneath twin moons, there are tales whispered in the mead halls that no warrior speaks aloud unless the wind howls a certain way. These are stories too heavy for songs, too vast for sagas, stories of a king who vanished not in death, but in defiance. His name was Leman Russ, the Wolf King, and he left with a promise on his lips. In the hour of the wolf, I shall return. But what drove him to disappear? What oath pulled a Primarch away from the Imperium he bled for? And why, 10,000 years later, does that vow still echo like thunder across time? Leman Russ was many things. He was a killer, a king, a loyal son, and a creature half-tamed by honor. To some, he was a barbarian. To others, a beast of unrelenting fury. But above all, he was the Emperor's executioner, the warhound unleashed when diplomacy failed and traitors dared to rise. He did not question his orders. He did not weigh political consequence. He simply asked, "Where is the enemy?" And then he made them howl. During the Great Crusade, it was Russ who broke the recalcitrant, who razed the strongholds of resistance and left nothing standing but the Emperor's will. His space wolves were more than shock troops. They were the fangs of imperial truth, bloody and brutal. But even wolves grow tired. The heresy changed everything. When brother turned against brother, Russ fought with the ferocity of a storm given flesh. He bled beside Rogal Dorn during the Siege of Terra. He tore through demons with fang and frost blade. And when Horus fell, when the traitor Primarchs scattered like shadows into the Eye of Terror, Russ did not celebrate. He mourned, not just for what had been lost, but for what he'd become. In the years after the heresy, as the Imperium tried to stitch itself back together, Leman Russ became restless. Others focused on rebuilding. Guilliman imposed structure. Dorn fortified walls. Vulkan and Corax, already withdrawing, faded into myth. But Russ paced. He wandered the halls of the Fang at night, sat alone in the throne room of Asaheim, eyes fixed on the horizon. He drank, yes, and laughed when he could. But there was something broken behind the mirth, something only his closest brothers saw. The guilt, for Prospero, for the heresy, for all the things his violence could not fix. He had obeyed the Emperor. He had unleashed hell on Magnus. But in the embers he had begun to ask, why? What had really been the truth of the Emperor's plan? Why had they been used as blades without ever being told the full shape of the war they fought? Russ was loyal, but he was not blind, and in that growing silence the howls of the warp grew louder. The traitor Primarchs had not been destroyed, only banished. Scattered across the Eye of Terror, they licked their wounds and built empires of madness. Mortarion, Perturabo, Angron, Fulgrim, Magnus himself. Russ understood what others did not want to admit. The war was not over. The Imperium had won the battle, but the hunt had just begun. It happened on a night of crimson auroras. The sky above Fenris shimmered with light that was not light, rippling like torn veils. The wolves grew restless, the ale soured, and Russ called his wolf lords to his hall for a feast. They drank, they fought, they laughed like gods. And then he spoke. He did not ask for permission. He did not explain himself. He only said this: "There is a foe we did not finish, a debt yet unpaid, and I will answer it." He told them he would not die old, rotting on a throne of stone. He would not fade behind walls while chaos stirred in the dark. The wolf must go into the storm, and so he would leave. He would take his most trusted companions, the 13th Great Company, warriors without peer, and vanish into the void, to hunt, to destroy, to find the traitors wherever they hid and end them. "I go to the Eye of Terror," he said. "I go to seek my doom, or theirs." No farewell, no ceremony, only howling winds and the thunder of launch bays opening beneath the Fang. Russ departed Fenris in the great wolf ship Hrafnkel, his chosen warriors silent as the grave. Some were clad in runic armor passed down for generations. Others bore weapons etched with oaths too old to name. And then he was gone. The space wolves searched. They sent longboats deep into the stars. They divined through fire and rune and blood. But they found nothing, only rumors, echoes, and the legend began. Across the millennia, sightings multiplied. A demon world, its tyrant king slain in the dead of night, ripped apart by claws, his fortress left in ruins. A chaos warband found butchered in orbit, their vox records catching only the sound of growling. An entire fleet from the word-bearers scattered by a storm shaped like a howling wolf. Each time, no survivors, only fear. Some said Russ had become a demon hunter, tearing through the eye with nothing but hate and fang. Others whispered he had fallen to the very madness he fought, that he had become a wolf spirit howling forever in the warp, a ghost of vengeance. But his sons did not believe it. The rune priests in trance sometimes felt his shadow. The great companies dreamed of him, standing at the edge of firelight, saying nothing but watching. The 13th Great Company, long thought lost, began to reappear, transformed, mutated by warp exposure, but still fighting the enemies of man with terrifying fury. These were no traitors. These were the Emperor's wolves, still hunting. And so the myth solidified. Leman Russ was not dead. He was in the Eye, on a hunt that would not end until the last traitor was torn apart. They call it the Hour of the Wolf. It is written in Fenrisian lore that in mankind's darkest moment, when the stars fall and hope is ash, the Wolf King will return, not in a ship, not as a man, but as a force of retribution. The sound of his approach will not be trumpets or hymns, it will be howling, a pack returning home. And until that day, his sons wait. They fight in his name, they tell his tales, they carry the oaths he made like sacred fire, because Leman Russ was never meant to rule in peace. He was meant to rage against the end, and somewhere in the Eye of Terror, perhaps on a demon world not yet mapped, beneath a sky of black flame, the Wolf King still hunts, waiting, enduring, keeping his oath, until the hour comes. In the ancient sagas of Fenris, sung by firelight and etched in the bones of slain worms, there is one tale whispered more than any other. It does not speak of battles fought or glories won, but of what is to come, a time not yet born but always near, a time of endings. They call it the Wolf Time, and at the center of it stands a lone figure, cloaked in starlight and storm, his eyes aflame with ancient fury. Leman Russ, the Wolf King, the Lord of the Rout, will return, not for peace, but for the reckoning. Across 10,000 years, as the Imperium buckled beneath the weight of its own survival, the tale of the Wolf Time endured. Not in data slates or ecclesiarch decrees, no, it lived in the mouths of the Skalds, in the smoke of ritual fires, in the dreams of the rune priests. It is said that when the stars bleed and the skies are torn asunder by war, when the Imperium stands on the knife edge of ruin and the last bastions of hope falter, the Wolf Time will begin, and the Wolf King will return to lead the final hunt. But where does this prophecy come from? What truth lies buried beneath the howling myth? To answer that, we must return to Fenris. Not the planet as the Imperium knows it now, with its fortresses and manufactorums, but to the old Fenris, The primordial Fenris of long winters and endless hunts. The world where Russ was found, not as a Primarch seated in gold, but as a child raised by wolves. Russ did not learn prophecy from scholars or priests. He felt it, deep in the marrow of the world. The tribes of Fenris have always been attuned to fate. They do not speak of the future as certainty, but as a path revealed in fire, ice, and blood. Their seers, rune speakers, and vision weavers do not see straight lines but snarls and fangs, packs clashing in the void. The first whispers of the wolf time came long before Russ left Fenris. They were not about him then, not yet. They were about a shadow, a darkness that could not be killed by blade or flame, a silence that would fall across the stars, and one hunter who would not sleep while it lived. When Russ took command of the Space Wolves, he listened to these visions. He respected them not as commands, but as warnings. He saw in them the possibility that one day his role would not be to build or rule, but to end. Throughout the Great Crusade, when asked of peace, he would often laugh. "There is no peace, only the long night," he once told Horus. "And I was not made for peace. I was made for the last war." These were not the words of a tactician. They were the words of a seer warrior, a man who already sensed that his greatest work lay not in conquest, but in return. The first formal recording of the prophecy comes from the Saga of the Fire Wolf, a legendary tale passed down by the Skalds of Asaheim. It describes a time of galactic unraveling. In the age when the stars bleed, and the throne is blind, and the black gates open wide, he shall return. Cloaked in winter, crowned in fury, the Wolf King shall lead the last pack. The final hunt shall begin. Brother shall stand against brother once more, and the fire of Fenris shall consume the sky. These are not the words of metaphor, not to the Space Wolves. They are a warning, a countdown, and every passing century brings its signs. The reappearance of the 13th Great Company, long thought lost in the eye of terror, was one such sign. Twisted and scarred by their time in the warp, these warriors returned not as lost souls, but as heralds. They spoke little, only in growls and broken runes, but what they did say chilled even the bravest Longfangs. "The path opens," they said. "The king stalks." To some, these were the ravings of madmen. To the rune priests, they were confirmation. Russ still lived, still hunted, still watched, and he was waiting for the moment when the final pack must be called. The wolf time is not just a prophecy. It is a cycle, echoing through the very bones of the Imperium. The first wolf time was the Horus Heresy, the betrayal of brother by brother, the sundering of legions, the burning of Terra. The second wolf time, some believe, was the age of apostasy, when the ecclesiarchy consumed the Imperium in fire and heresy, and faith became law. And now, many believe we stand on the brink of the third. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, has torn the galaxy in half. The Astronomicon flickers. Entire sectors have vanished into warp storms. Demons walk in daylight. The Primarchs are gone or changed beyond recognition. Guilliman, risen from stasis, now stands alone among relics and tyrants. The endgame begins, and in Fenris, the storms howl louder. The Space Wolves have not forgotten. They prepare in silence. They train not for survival, but for war on a scale not seen since the Siege of Terra. The great companies patrol the stars like hungry packs, sniffing out the scent of chaos wherever it festers. They speak little of the prophecy in public, but every wolf knows it by heart. When the wolf time begins, they will be called home. And when Russ returns, they must be ready. But what will Russ be when he returns? Will he be the warrior king of old, his frost axe crackling with righteous fury? Or something else, something changed by the Eye of Terror, shaped by 10,000 years of war and loss? This is the question that haunts even the boldest lords of the rout. Because legends do not return unchanged. If Russ has been fighting in the Eye all this time, hunting demon Primarchs, slaying gods in the dark, then he has walked paths no mortal mind can follow. And when he returns, it may not be with mercy. It may be with the end. But perhaps that is what the Imperium will need. Not a savior, a destroyer of endings. A king who knows that sometimes the only cure for rot is fire. Until that day, the wolves howl beneath Fenris's broken moons. The skalds sing their songs, and the space wolves listen for the voice in the wind, the one that speaks not in words but in hunger. The voice that says, "Gather your blades, call your kin." The hunt begins again. Because when the wolf time comes, Leman Russ will answer, and woe to the traitor who stands in his path. In the boundless dusk of the Segmentum Pacificus, where the stars glimmer like the eyes of predators watching from high grass, there are tales of a hunter who rides the void as a steppe warrior once did the wind. No one sees him coming. There is no heraldry, no fanfare, no warning. Only the silver flash of lightning across the hull of a pirate vessel and the silence that follows. They call him the Warhawk. But to those who know the ancient sagas of Terra, those who remember the vanished sons of the Emperor, that name carries a deeper meaning. Jaghatai Khan, Primarch of the White Scars, the swiftest, most elusive, and most mysterious of the Emperor's sons. A man who laughed in battle, rode like thunder, and vanished not in death, but in pursuit. And unlike the others, his disappearance was not into stasis or into the maw of chaos. Number Jaghatai Khan rode into the Webway, and no one followed. To understand the Khan's fate, one must first understand the nature of his war. While his brothers built fortresses, forged empires, and carved out regions of influence during the Great Crusade, Jaghatai Khan built nothing. He liberated, he destroyed, he moved. His loyalty was never in question, but it was not born of ideology. It came from honor, from the code of the steppes. He obeyed the Emperor not because of genes or destiny, but because the Emperor had earned his respect. Jaghatai was not drawn to the cold mechanics of Guilliman's empire, nor to Dorn's bricks and bastions. He did not envy Sanguinius's charisma or Russ's savagery. He found freedom in the wild void, where his legion, the White Scars, could race across the stars like lightning on open plains. But when the heresy broke the galaxy, he did not hesitate. Jaghatai turned his blade against Horus without pause. The traitor sons came for him, offering promises, begging him to join their rebellion. He refused, not with diplomacy, not with sermons. He simply said, "You are not worthy of my loyalty." And then he went to war. The White Scars became terror incarnate to the traitor forces. Their speed was unmatched. Their mastery of hit-and-run tactics, of misdirection, of spatial warfare made them nearly impossible to trap. Mortarian's Death Guard tried, on more than one occasion, to box the Scars in with disease-choked fleets. The Khan slaughtered them. It was during one such encounter, fought amidst the decaying ring worlds of the Kondak system, that he first encountered the alien menace that would one day shape his fate. The Drukhari, the dark kin of the Eldar, soul thieves, sadists, raiders of real space. Unlike the Eldari craft-worlders, who fought with vision and prophecy, the Drukhari hunted for sport. They struck from the shadows, their ships disappearing through hidden tunnels in the very fabric of reality. The Webway, an ancient extra-dimensional network built by the Eldar in the distant past, linking worlds across impossible distances. A labyrinth of light and horror that wrapped around the galaxy like the arteries of a god. The Drukhari had long used it as their private hunting ground, but now the Khan had seen it. and he never forgot. In the centuries that followed the heresy, Jaghatai Khan became increasingly obsessed with the Drukhari. Unlike his brothers, who focused on the traitors and the reformation of the Imperium, the Khan looked outward. He did not care for power. He had no interest in codexes, in bureaucracy, or in rebuilding shattered worlds. He saw the galaxy still bleeding, and he saw who twisted the knife. The Xenos, the unseen predators, the slavers. To the Khan, the heresy was not the final betrayal. It was only the opening act. Mankind was still preyed upon by things it didn't even understand. The Imperium's fleets could not reach them. Its laws meant nothing in the Shadow Realms. But the Khan knew a way. The Webway. It became his obsession. He began to send scouts into warp anomalies. He interrogated captured Eldar. He even negotiated briefly with the Harlequins, the laughing mask dancers who, alone among the Eldari, walked freely through the Webway. And slowly, he learned its paths. His own librarians, stormseers, began to chart whispers of hidden gates, rifts masked by ion storms, corridors that flickered into view only under certain stellar alignments. The Khan's plan was never written, never formalized, but the signs were there. He would not wait for the enemy to strike. He would ride into their world. The last known record of Jaghatai Khan comes from the raid on the Gate of Bones. It was a Drukhari fortress world hidden within the Webway, accessible only via a warp rift hidden near the dying star of Nimed IV. For years, the Drukhari had been abducting entire settlements from Imperial frontier worlds, leaving behind only smoking ruins and echoing screams. The Khan led the assault personally. It was unlike anything the Imperium had ever attempted. A full chapter-strength strike launched into the Webway itself. No reinforcements, no fallback, only the Khan, his stormseers, and a fury cold as Fenrisian ice. They tore through the Drukhari slaver ships like thunder. White Scars bikers roared down gravity-warped tunnels, plasma bolts shrieking past flickering alien architecture. Astartes rode jet bikes through crystalline archways, cutting down wyches and homunculi in mid-air duels. And at the heart of it all, Jaghatai Khan led the charge, his power, glaive, moonfang, singing with every sweep. When they reached the inner sanctum, the true lair of the Drukhari Archon responsible for the raids, the fighting reached a crescendo of madness. The Webway itself seemed to rebel, fragmenting into screaming tunnels and imploding nexuses. The Khan turned to his sons and spoke his final words. "Hold the gate. I ride for the hunt." And then he vanished through a light tunnel that blinked shut behind him like a predator's eye. No one has seen him since. Many believed him dead. But over time, rumors emerged. Drukhari warlords assassinated in their own palaces, no trace left but a sliver of ceramite and a scent of ozone. Raiding parties vanishing mid-raid, their ships later found drifting, hulls slashed open from within. The Harlequins speak of a rider who moves through the Webway like a ghost, slaying not for vengeance but for balance. A human who learned the labyrinth's ways and mastered them. They call him the Hunter at the end of roads. But the White Scars know better. They leave a place for him at every feast. They tell the young when they see lightning race across the sky. The Khan rides. They say he is not lost. He is pursuing. And when the galaxy's paths burn in war, when the Webway vomits forth horrors no mortal hand can halt, the Warhawk will return, not with an army, but as the storm itself, and every slave-taker, every Xenos raider, every hidden predator will hear the thunder of his engines, and know they are prey. The hunt never ended. Only the hunter vanished. There are paths through the galaxy that no map can show, corridors carved not by time or space, but by thought and intention. Veins of impossible geometry, lightless tunnels of polychromatic flame, where distance twists like a ribbon in the wind. This is the Webway, the ancient domain of the Eldar, older than mankind, older than the Imperium itself. And somewhere within it, far beyond reason or reach, rides a man. His name is Jaghatai Khan, and he is not lost. He is hunting. It began not with an order or a prophecy, but with a choice. After the raid on the Gate of Bones, when the white scars tore open a wound in the Webway and stormed into the heart of a Drukhari slaver realm, the Khan saw something few humans ever do, the true shape of movement. To the Khan, who had lived his entire life in motion, from the steppe plains of Chogoris to the void campaigns of the Great Crusade, the Webway was not an alien curiosity. It was liberation. Here he could ride beyond stars. Here, war could be waged not across decades, but across heartbeats. Here he could strike from nowhere and vanish again into the light. But he did not enter this labyrinth to marvel at its power. He entered it to make war. To understand why, we must go deeper into Jaghatai's nature. Among all the Primarchs, Jaghatai was perhaps the least understood. Not because he was hidden or obscure. His white scars fought as fiercely and visibly as any legion, but because he did not explain himself. Where Guilliman left texts and Dorn left stone, the Khan left wind. He fought, won, and vanished. His mind was like his battle strategy, fluid, non-linear, impossible to catch. Even his closest brothers often mistook his silence for disinterest, his laughter for levity. They were wrong. Jaghatai was not simple. He was free. And that freedom, that refusal to be trapped by doctrine, by prophecy, by fate, shaped every choice he made. So when he saw the truth of the Drukhari, how they preyed upon the Imperium from within the folds of unreality, stealing entire cities in moments, feeding on pain and souls, he knew no fortress could stop them, no fleet could catch them. Only he could. After the Webway raid, the White Scars waited for their Primarch to return. Hours passed, then days. The Stormseers peered into the rift, trying to trace his path. But the Webway is not a thing that can be tracked. It is a living maze, a mirror to the mind. It is not where you go, it is what you intend. And Jaghatai Khan's intentions were unknowable. So they waited, for years, then centuries, then millennia. And still he did not return. But the signs began to emerge, not in Ultramar or on Terra, not in fortress monasteries or relic vaults, but in the deep void, in the half-glimpsed corners of the galaxy. The places maps are afraid to mark. A Deathwatch kill team returned from a Webway incursion, bleeding and half-mad, speaking of a ghost warrior who fought alongside them against the Drukhari before vanishing into a portal of light. An Inquisitor interrogating a captured Archon was told, before the creature self-immolated, that the great falcon rides the veins of the gods once more. A Harlequin Shadowseer, speaking to an Eldar Farseer, whispered a line later preserved in the Black Library. The Warhawk has found the heart of the maze, and he flies toward the final gate. Each account differed. Some described him in golden armor, others cloaked in white lightning. A few even insisted he had changed, grown taller, older, like a figure carved from myth, no longer bound by flesh alone. But always he moved fast, and always he killed slavers. For the Drukhari, he became a nightmare. He did not fight like the others. He did not storm gates or lay siege. He struck from the impossible angles. Through Webway tunnels the Eldar had sealed for millennia. Through cracks even the Harlequins dared not enter. They tried to trap him. They failed. They tried to ambush him. They died. There is a term whispered in Komarach, the shadow capital of the Drukhari, Tarl-Han Sai. It means the one who kills from the horizon. They do not say it near the real space gates. Not anymore. But the Khan's war is not just one of blades and blood. In the depths of the Webway, beyond even Drukhari reach, are realms left behind by the Old Ones. Ruins of pre-human gods, labyrinths of sentient glass, caverns where time bleeds backward. And it is here, some believe, the Khan now rides, not only hunting, but learning how the Webway truly works, how to move without being seen, how to open gates closed since the war in heaven. The Harlequins will not speak of it, but they do not deny it either. Some say the laughing god, the trickster Segorak, walks beside him now, not as a master, but as a fellow wanderer. A whisper in the mist, a grin in the void. Others fear the truth is darker, that the Khan has seen something within the Webway, a horror or secret so great that he cannot return, that he is not lost but bound, fighting not slavers or Xenos, but something beneath the maze. A hunger that even chaos fears, a prison door that must not open. Whatever the truth, the Khan has become more than a man. He is now a legend that moves, not passive, not waiting like Russ or slumbering like Guilliman once did. He is active, a force, a moving blade, and the Imperium has not forgotten. The white scars leave offerings at the gates of their temples, tiny jade hawks, broken chains, relics carved from lightning-struck stone. Each one a message. We ride with you, Father. For they know, deep in their gene seed, in the code passed down from Chogoris, that when the storm returns, when the great gates open, it will not be through Terra or Fenris or Ultramar that salvation rides. It will come screaming through the Webway, like thunder on the steppes, a flash of silver, a cry of wild defiance, and behind it, the Warhawk, laughing, bleeding, alive. He does not come for glory. He does not seek reunion. He rides because the path demands it, because the war is not yet won, because he will not allow a single soul to suffer bondage while he still breathes, because he is Jaghatai Khan, son of the Emperor, rider of the Webway. And his journey is not over. It has only just begun. In the darkest crucibles, beneath pressure and fire, something strange happens to metal. It doesn't break, it transforms. It becomes stronger, more resilient, tempered. That is the way of the Forge. And it is also the way of the man they called the Unconquered Flame, Vulkan, Primarch of the Salamanders, son of fire and mercy. The only one of the Emperor's sons who never stopped caring. Among the 18 Primarchs, Vulkan stood apart, not only because of his immense physical strength, not even because of the truth of his immortality, but because of his humanity. In a time when brothers fell to madness, to ego, to fire and blood, Vulkan remained kind. And that is perhaps why the universe seemed to punish him most of all. He disappeared not in glory nor in vengeance. He disappeared in sacrifice, and in doing so became a flame that refuses to go out. To understand Vulkan's final moments, you must understand the philosophy he lived by. Unlike his more militant brothers, Vulkan did not see war as an art form or a proving ground for honor. He saw it as a duty, an ugly necessity, engaged only to protect those who could not protect themselves. He believed that strength was meaningless without compassion, that the truest test of power was how gently it could be wielded. The Salamander's Legion reflected this belief. They protected the innocent. They refused to abandon civilians, even at great tactical cost. They brought not just death, but relief, bringing water, food, shelter, and fire, not for destruction, but for warmth. It was a legacy born on the volcanic world of Nocturne, a brutal, unstable death world scorched by twin suns and plagued by monstrous beasts. It was there that Vulkan was found as an infant, raised by blacksmiths, surviving and thriving through raw endurance and unbreakable will. He did not rule as a tyrant. He led as a guardian. When the Emperor came to claim him, Vulkan did not bow in awe. He challenged him, and perhaps most tellingly, the Emperor did not rebuke him. He smiled. He had found the most loyal of all. During the Great Crusade, Vulkan's loyalty was never in question. He clashed at times with his brothers, most notably Kurz, the Night Haunter who mocked his mercy as weakness, but he never wavered from his path. Even in the burning madness of the Horus Heresy, when worlds were falling and brother slew brother, Vulkan held true. At Istvan V, he was betrayed and captured by Kurz, tortured beyond imagining, killed and resurrected, again and again and again. Because Vulkan, as it would later be discovered, was not like the others. He was perpetual, immortal. Each death at the hands of the Night Haunter, some say numbering in the hundreds, broke bone and mind, but never soul. He endured not for vengeance, not for pride, but because someone had to, because giving up meant failing humanity. After the heresy, Vulkan disappeared from public view for some time. Some say he returned to Nocturne. Others claim he wandered the stars. What is known is this: he left behind 9 artifacts, priceless relics of such craftsmanship and power that even the Mechanicus dared not alter them. They were known as the Tome of Fire, and his sons were told, "When the 9 are gathered, I shall return." Whether this was a literal promise or a symbolic hope has never been fully answered, but the Salamanders believed. They searched, across dead worlds, through warp storms, beneath black oceans. They found many. Some are still missing, but they keep looking, because faith is a fire, and fire is Vulkan's gift. Then came the War of the Beast, a cataclysmic war, unlike any before or since, an orc uprising so vast, so coordinated, that it threatened the very foundations of the Imperium. Whole chapters were annihilated, entire sectors fell in days, and the High Lords of Terra, bloated with politics and indecision, were helpless. Desperate, they turned not to bureaucrats, but to legends. They summoned what remained of the Adeptus Astartes, the shattered remnants of the old legions. And among the storm of that desperate call, one name answered: Vulkan. He appeared not with fleets or banners, but in a drop pod wreathed in flame, crashing through the spires of Terra's ruling chambers. He walked through fire and ash, his armor blackened by time, his eyes glowing with forge light. He said nothing. He simply raised his hammer and swore to stop the beast. The final battles of the War of the Beast are recorded in fragments, some intentionally censored by the Inquisition, others lost in the ravages of time. But what is known is that the orcs had evolved. The beast was not a warlord, but a god-king, a being of psychic might, technology, and energy so vast it warped reality itself. Multiple war bosses, cloned and resurrected, led the greenskin armies from a world-sized fortress. Vulkan led the charge to end it. Again and again, he struck at the heart of their empire. He was burned, crushed, eviscerated, and every time he rose again, the orcs began to fear him. They called him the Death That Walks. In the final act of the war, Vulkan volunteered to enter the deepest part of the orc fortress, a living factory of energy. The inquisitorial records are sealed, but those who fought beside him described a chamber pulsing with green madness, a core of psychic instability held together by orc belief and crude genius. It was a place no human could survive. And so Vulkan went alone. He fought for hours, or days, or years. Time does not pass normally near the heart of a field. No one knows exactly what he saw, only that he reached the heart, and that it was broken. And that when the fortress began to collapse, the orcs' power broke with it. The ended, but Vulkan did not return. No body was recovered, no signal, no death, only silence. And in the centuries since, that silence has become echo. His sons do not mourn. They do not build tombs. They keep the forge burning. They guard the relics. And they wait. Because Vulkan is not like the others, he does not sleep in stasis. He did not flee into the eye of terror. He was not taken by madness or vengeance. He simply disappeared, as if stepping into the flame to become one with it. But sometimes, fire leaves embers. There are rumors. Always, a forge world saved from an orc invasion by a towering figure in black iron. A mysterious warrior appearing aboard a crippled salamander's vessel, guiding it through a warp storm before vanishing. A voice, heard in prayer, echoing from the flame. Endure. The fire will guide you home. The salamanders believe he still walks among them, hidden in the flame, waiting until the Imperium needs him most. Because he is not gone. He is the unconquered flame. And fire never dies. It waits. It burns. And one day, when the forge of mankind gutters and fails, and the stars go dark, Vulkan will return to relight the fire. There is a tale told among the salamanders, spoken only in the dim glow of the forge, when the flame burns low and the silence presses against the soul. It is not recited in glory halls or sung beside trophies. It is whispered, because it is not a tale of victory, but of burden. Not of triumph, but of endurance. They call it the last stand of the salamander. And at its heart, like the iron core of a world, stands Vulkan. Not as a conqueror, not even as a Primarch, but as a shield. This is the story of how he vanished not in death, but in sacrifice, during the cataclysm known only as the War of the Beast. By the time the great greenskin Wah tore across the segmentum solar, the galaxy was already fractured. The scars of the Horus Heresy still wept blood. The legions were gone, scattered into chapters. The Primarchs had vanished, fallen, fled. Only echoes of the Age of Heroes remained, growing fainter with each passing year. And then the beast came. It was not a warlord, not a single orc chieftain bellowing orders in crude dialect. It was something new, an orc gestalt, vast and focused, its intellect as sharp as its brutality. It wielded war like a scalpel and brought entire systems to their knees before the Imperium could even muster a reply. For the first time since the Siege of Terra, the Imperium faced extinction, and it had no Primarchs to answer. None. Until he returned. Vulkan came like a hammer blow, descending upon the High Lords not with petitions or pleasantries, but with wrath. He stormed the chambers of Terra with no escort, armor scorched and blackened, the ancient hammer Drago's wrath gripped in his gauntleted fists. He had been gone for centuries, some whispered millennia, but his presence was unmistakable. He did not ask. He commanded. He would lead the war effort. He would unify the chapters. He would end the beast, and none dared argue. Because when Vulkan spoke, it was like the heart of the mountain itself had opened its voice, slow, deep, and undeniable. The war that followed was not a campaign. It was a crucible. Entire chapters were consumed. Black Templars, Crimson Fists, Iron Hands, all bled and died against the green tide. Vulkan fought at the forefront, never retreating, never resting. Again and again, he was seen striding through battlefields of fire and ruin, dragging wounded Astartes from under rubble, shielding civilians with his own body, refusing to abandon a single soul. The stories spread of orcs that burst into flame just by looking at him, of battlefields that lit with fire when he struck the ground, of the unconquered flame walking once more. But none of that was what mattered. What mattered was this: he would not break. Even when they reached the core of the orc threat, Ulanor, the long-dormant world of imperial triumph, turned Xenos' stronghold, Vulkan went ahead. Alone. The plan was suicidal. Ulanor had become the heart of the war, a world-sized fortress of warp-charged energy, its crust studded with weapons that defied Imperial understanding. At its center stood a citadel of iron and bone, larger than continents, pulsing with power, not just physical but psychic. Belief given form. And beneath it, they said, dwelled the beast, not a war boss, not a monster, a god. The final assault began in fire. Imperial fleets clashed with Orc battle moons. Drop pods rained from orbit. Void shields crackled like thunder. Vulkan led the first strike himself, carving a path through the enemy stronghold with the fury of a dying star. He wielded no ranged weapon, only Drago's wrath, and a furnace at the core of his being that seemed to burn brighter with every step. He was killed, once, twice, a dozen times. Each time his warriors thought they had lost him, and each time he rose again, skin seared, armor ruined, eyes glowing with molten fury. Because he could not die. He was a perpetual, one of a rare few, gifted or cursed with eternal regeneration. And so he pushed deeper, until he reached the core. What he found there is still debated, even among the highest orders of the Inquisition. The Orcs had built a machine of belief, a war engine that channeled the collective will of the Green Horde into reality-warping energy. At its center, suspended in a vat of raw psychic force, was the beast, massive, hulking, immortal by the faith of his kind. Vulkan did not hesitate. He leapt into the vat, not with a bomb, not with a prayer, but with fire. They say the chamber screamed, not the Orcs, the machine itself. Because Vulkan wasn't just fighting flesh, he was fighting the idea of the beast, and he was burning it alive. The salamanders who reached the chamber minutes later found only ruin. The vat had ruptured, its contents reduced to slag. The walls were fused with what looked like living flame. The beast was gone. The WAAAGH engine was silent, and there was no body, no armor, no trace, only a single blackened handprint seared into the stone floor. A symbol, not of death, but of endurance. The Imperium would survive, but it would never be the same. The High Lords tried to erase Vulkan's final act, afraid of what it meant. A being who defied death, who sacrificed himself not for power, but for others. His legend, they feared, might inspire disobedience. But the chapters remembered, especially the salamanders. They kept the handprint, cut from the stone and sealed in a reliquary. They kept the flame alive. In the centuries that followed, there were signs, reports of a black-armored figure saving colonies from Xenos raiders, then vanishing. A forge world under siege, suddenly spared by a single warrior who emerged from molten rock, wielding a hammer that rang like thunder. A dying salamander chaplain, delirious, whispering of a voice that told him, "Your fire is not out. Keep forging. I am still at the anvil." So now they wait, not in despair, but in conviction. Because Vulkan is not like the others, he does not sleep, he does not rage, he does not chase vengeance. He is the fire that remains, the light in the dark, the last breath before the end. And when the Imperium begins to fall, not from outside, but from within, when it forgets its purpose, its humanity, its reason to even exist, that is when the forge will burn again. That is when the unconquered flame will return, to make his last stand not in death, but in rebirth. There is a silence that hangs over Terra, not the silence of peace, but the silence of absence, of voices that once commanded legions, now stilled, of thrones that sit cold, of names once spoken with awe and reverence, now whispered like lost prayers. This is the Imperium without its Primarchs, and it is a darker place. When the Primarchs vanished, one by one, into death, Exile, stasis, madness, or myth, the galaxy did not pause. The wars did not stop. The enemies did not wait. The Imperium, vast beyond comprehension, sprawling across 1,000,000 worlds, had no time for grief. It adapted, because that is what the Imperium does. Not through brilliance, not through nobility, through endurance. But endurance has a price, and the price of losing the Emperor's sons was nothing less than the soul of mankind. At the height of the Great Crusade, the Primarchs had been more than commanders. They were symbols, beacons, the Emperor's will made flesh. Though flawed, some fatally so, they gave form to the dream of a unified humanity. Each one bore a fragment of his design: Guilliman's structure, Russ's ferocity, Dorn's duty, Corax's justice, the Khan's freedom, Vulkan's compassion, the Lion's code. Without them, the Imperium did not become still. It became rigid. Where once the Primarchs argued over strategy, over morality, over the shape of the Imperium to be, now no one questioned anything. The High Lords of Terra, unelected by the people, elevated through politics, war, or shadow, took the reins. 1,000 bureaucrats, generals, and schemers whispering in the shadow of a silent emperor. No longer did the Imperium push outward in truth. It curled inward, afraid, suspicious, and slowly it forgot. It forgot the dream of illumination, of enlightenment, of unity through strength and reason. It remembered only the fear. And so that fear was codified, fossilized into doctrine, enshrined into law. Where the Primarchs had once made war as a means to peace, the Imperium now made war as a necessity of survival. Faith replaced purpose. Zealotry replaced truth. The Codex Astartes became scripture. The Emperor, once a father and ruler, became a god, a dead god on a golden throne, and his sons, missing, scattered, lost, became saints, or demons, depending on who you asked. The Adeptus Astartes, once legions bound by blood to their Primarchs, fragmented into chapters. Some remained true to their lineage, holding fast to the virtues of their founder. Others drifted, shaped by new wars, new worlds, new wounds. The Space Wolves still howled for Russ, the White Scars still rode for the Khan. The Salamanders still watched the flame, waiting for Vulkan to return. The Dark Angels hunted their secrets, waiting for the Lion. The Ultramarines, alone among all, still had Guilliman's shadow, even if he slept. But none of them had guidance, only memory. And memory is a brittle shield in the face of eternity. Across the Imperium, relics of the Primarchs became icons. Chapels held shards of armor, locks of hair, pieces of bone, some real, some fabricated, all worshipped. On shrine worlds, sermons were preached not just in the Emperor's name, but in that of his sons. Vulkan the Forge Master, Dorn the Martyr, Russ the Avenger, Corax the Ghost, the Khan the Wind, the Lion the Watcher. Their teachings became gospel, but their teachings were never meant to be static. The Primarchs evolved, learned, failed, and rose again. They were not gods, they were men, superhuman, yes, but human still. Without them, their ideas were frozen in time, misunderstood, deified, and so, ironically, their absence birthed a galaxy they would never have wanted. And yet, the Imperium endured. It always does, even when it should fall. Even when the warp tore open the skies, and the cicatrix maledictum bled across the stars, even then, mankind did not break, because it can't afford to. There is no one coming to save it, or so it thought. There are whispers now, a new stirring. Some say Guilliman walks again, that he breathes, commands, fights, that he weeps for what he finds. Others say the Lion has stirred, that in the deepest chambers of the rock, the watchers in the dark have awakened him. The wolves speak of howls echoing from the Eye of Terror. The scars claim their star maps have begun to shift, as if someone unseen now moves through the Webway once more. And the Salamander's forge fires burn hotter than ever before. But these are only whispers. The truth is harder to find, because hope in the Imperium is a dangerous thing. It inspires, but it also invites destruction. To hope is to expect something more than survival. And in a galaxy like this, survival is a victory all its own. But still, people hope. The Adepta Sororitas light candles in the names of the lost sons. Pilgrims carry banners etched with their sigils. The Astartes drill harder, march further, fight longer. Not for their chapters, but for the chance to see their Gene Father return. The Mechanicus dig through time itself, scouring ancient void runes for any mention of the Primarchs, and the Inquisition watches it all with cold eyes, fearing what their return might truly mean. Because what if they come back and do not recognize the Imperium? What if they see a monster where once stood a dream? What if they choose to burn it all down? The Imperium without the Primarchs is not dead, but it is wounded. It limps, it bleeds, it forgets itself, it sings the songs of gods, forgetting that those gods were once brothers, warriors, sons flawed and mighty and human. And yet, even in their absence, the Primarchs have shaped every moment since. By leaving, they became more than commanders. They became ideas, and ideas cannot die. So we ask, at the edge of this dark millennium, will they return? Will the avenging sun rise to lead again? Will the Wolf King emerge from the Eye? Will the Khan burst forth from the Webway? Will the Forge Master walk out of fire? Will the Raven Lord dive from the shadows? Will the Lion wake in the dark? And if they do, what will they find? An empire, a prison, a people worth saving, or a galaxy already lost? There is only one truth. They are out there, watching, hunting, forging, waiting. And one day, maybe not in this age, maybe not even in the next, but one day, the stars will shake, the thrones will crack, the bells will toll, and the Imperium will see its sons return, not as saviors, but as reckoning. Because the Primarchs were never meant to stay. They were meant to be missed, to remind mankind that the light it waits for must also be kindled within. Even in their absence, they guide us. They endure. They are not gone. They are the fire on the horizon.